Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Moments with Mindleaps. I'm Rebecca Davis, and I'm the Executive Director of Mindleaps. And many of you have been starting to tune in with us on Fridays to see the wonderful guests that we have who are sharing with us their thoughts, their passions, their challenges, and all of these things as we go through the continuation of COVID and the world gets more and more complicated. I'm particularly lucky today because we are going to be joined by the wonderful Dr. Janelle Junkin. And let me just add her in here. I see her request. Okay, wonderful. Dr. Janelle and I have known each other since before she was even a doctor. So it's really wonderful to see how far she's come and to also have a researcher join us on one of these sessions. We've been learning so much from our dancers and our creatives, but Janelle brings a special point of view to her work and to her view on the world, both as a music therapist and as an artist, and also as a researcher who's done a tremendous amount of work on social emotional learning, fighting poverty, fighting for justice, and doing it around the globe. So we're very happy to have her joining us today. I think she's just connecting. Okay. And Dr. Janelle, so I've made a joke with her that we're always calling her Dr. Janelle since she worked so hard to get that PhD. And I hear you, Janelle, but I don't see you yet.
Oh, okay.
But I think it's my side. I think it's still connecting.
Okay.
And I love that laugh that has become such a part of our trips abroad and our research sessions together. Let's see if okay, let me view you. Great. Janelle, thank you for doing this. I know you have many different things going on, and you're connecting so much with all of your clients right now. So we're very lucky to get a little bit of your time on a Friday. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Janelle knows that I often come to her with some of the most complicated situations in Mindleaps that range. And a lot of it has been about how do we look at the world and then turn it into information and quantitative data and things that we can learn from to grow as people and to grow as an organization. And I think, Janelle, one of the reasons that it's been such a joy to work with you over these years is that you are also an artist. And I've had the chance most recently to hear you play. And I know that when you look at the world and when you look at people, that you understand that connection with the arts. I wonder, where does that come from in your life? What that musician, but it's more than just that. Where does that creativity come from?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I thought I'd give you an easy one to start with.
Gosh, I think that humanity is creative, right? That there's a part of us that we all create in different ways. And so for me, my creativity comes out through music especially, but through the arts in general. And so, I would say it's probably something that's always been with me. But I probably tapped into it in a very real way. When my parents divorced, I kind of was like, I don't know what's happening with me. I don't know how to deal with the world. I had a lot of anger. And I actually, I was in church on a Sunday morning, and somebody was playing the flute, and I don't have an explanation other than to say, like, my soul recognized that instrument, and I was like, I am going to learn how to play that instrument, and that's going to be how I express myself. And so I started taking lessons and performing and doing all of these things. And then, as I got through high school, I learned about the field of music therapy, and then, learned how to play the piano and the guitar and some vocal things as well. So, it's more ethereal maybe than exact, but that's actually how I got into all of that. But I would say that,
You began that day when you heard the flute.
It did. It really did. Yeah. And I've never looked back. But right, I get very excited and interested in about the idea of engaging in creativity with other people and the importance of that. So for me, that feeds me as a person and who I am, and I want to share that with others as well.
It's interesting what you say too, like humanity is creative.
Hmm.
Especially right now when the world is so complicated and when there's budget cuts, and I think everywhere in the world,
Yeah.
on all levels, then you hear people once again say what we always say, oh, cut the arts, cut the arts. And it's just like when you say that, but it's not like these people are creative and these people aren't, and this is the people who were trained in it. I mean, at the end of the day, isn't like it a basic part of humanity? We were trained to find solutions, to think certain ways, to express ourselves, to manage our emotions that way. And I don't know, even right now I think of it a little bit differently, hearing you say such a clear sentence about it.
Yeah, and I think it goes into, and I think, right, the misnomer is like the hard sciences belong in one side and the arts belong in another. But if we look at it through the lens of creativity, isn't all creative, right? So if you think about these people who've made these important discoveries in science, it had to come from a place of creativity, from a place of saying, how this is being done actually doesn't work anymore. So let's look at this from another perspective and from another way of thinking. And so to pull the hard sciences and the arts part doesn't make any sense to me, because right, it's all about creativity. How do we engage in creative thinking and then in the execution of that? So for artists, it's going to come out artistically. For scientists, it's going to come out scientifically, but aren't we all doing the same thing?
Yeah. Oh, so
Yeah.
it's like no surprise that you have a PhD now. um, I've been with you on that PhD journey, and for those of you who don't know Janelle, maybe as well as I have the pleasure to know her, she's not only a music therapist, but she's done her PhD in the creative arts therapy areas, and also is a psychologist, and has also worked with Build a Bridge, which is a wonderful organization that's doing arts training in very important communities and has found a way to scale this type of training around the world. And you've also played the role of executive directors before and board members before. You've seen so many sides of these areas. I wonder if there's, especially right now with all of the challenges that we face, if there's kind of one thing that's happened to you in your career so far where you really think, wow, those are the lessons I'm using right now.
Yeah. Um,
It's hard because you have
you,
too
you know,
many accomplishments to choose from, Janelle.
but I think not to be pedantic about it, but like it's listening, right? So how do I listen to my clients if when I'm talking about being a creative arts therapist? How am I listening to communities when I'm working and co-creating with communities? How am I listening to board members? How am I listening? And then also thinking about how am I responding, right? And so those things, and again, for me, that ties going back to that creativity, right? How can I creatively listen? How can I creatively respond in a way that I'm heard and I'm validating what I'm hearing as well? So I think that's probably the main lesson from all the different areas that I've been involved in, is the importance of, and it's the act of listening, right? So listening is an active experience.
You're
Hmm.
making my brain fire this afternoon, because when you say some of these things, that I piece together moments or times that we've been together in the past, and I see that at play. But you've crystallized kind of those core things that you've tapped into in the past, and this idea of listening is something that Mindleaps was so lucky to witness, but more than witness, to benefit from. When you had the chance to travel with us to Rwanda twice, and the first time you went, my strong memory of that time is how you, as a researcher who understands all of these theories and frameworks, came and sat down with street kids and listened to them, and
Hmm.
then came back to me and said, this is how we could measure this emotional change. And it's
Yeah.
that, I mean, I've just never heard that level of listening from somebody who didn't come from that community or wasn't part of building Mindleaps or was dancing in class with them every day, although you did dance with them.
I did, yes.
And I think, yeah, I just think, yeah, that must have been a key attribute of yours that made you so successful in helping us figure out the system that's evolved since then. I wonder what your strong memories are of Rwanda, now that I'm recalling mine.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you that, but the other thing I'm thinking about as you're kind of reflecting that back to me is the language that I'm also using right now is to talk about, like, I have a level of expertise, but my expertise is limited. And so if I'm going to be good at what I do, I have to constantly be learning and open to learning and hearing from other experts, including people who are experts on their own lives. And so, yeah, that's key for me. Um, yeah, I think some of my, okay, so I have a couple of memories. I don't know if Sally's on at all, but I'm going to give a shout out to Sally. Sally introduced me to my first taste of goat, and it was fantastic. And so that's one of my key memories. Um, but another really, two other memories that stick out to me. Actually, there's three, I'll say. One is that you're right. I did, because as a researcher and because I'm not a dancer, I wanted to take the dance class to make sure that I understood what was happening in my body. So to have an understanding of what the kids were telling me was happening in their bodies as they were dancing and learning, and then how that connected to their cognitive development. And so I remember taking that class, and it was 2 hours. And at the end of it, I thought, these kids might have to actually carry me out of here. And this to like watch them like leap across. And I had this newfound respect and understanding for, kids with what would on the outside, I think outsiders would look at them and say they have limited resources, and yet here they were walking miles and sometimes hours to get to classes, taking these 2-hour classes, and then walking back and going to wherever their respective places were. And so I think like that was really key for me to understanding like what the actual importance of participating in these classes were for these kids. And then one of the other things that I was thinking about, even as we had our brief talk a little bit before, one of the evenings that I was there in Rwanda, we were talking about, kind of coming at things from an assets-based perspective. So, everybody knows that, or hopefully everybody knows that Rwanda is a country that is, still recovering from their genocide. And so, and what lessons can be learned, and I think that can also lead to saying, well, like, we don't have enough, or we don't have something, we always must rely on others to get what we need. And we spent this really fantastic evening together with the staff, and just kind of talked about like all of the great assets and resources, and listing them and naming them that the Rwandans had, and that they contribute equally. Right, so it's not just this program that's supported by people in the United States, but that there is equal contributions being made in other ways on the side of the Rwandans as well. And so, like, that was really a key turning point, I think, for me, and especially in how the staff began to interact with me, but also being able to say, like, here's another way of understanding the program and how changes that could be made and how we could move forward. And then I think the third thing was, or the last piece that I'll say is the time that I just got to spend just being with the kids who are in the program as well as the staff. But, sitting outside, sitting on blankets, sitting, on the porch. There were kids who, when they found out that I was a musician, there were four kids who, right? They got a guitar and they came and they played and they sang for me, and then I played and I sang for them, and it was just this really fantastic experience that I won't forget, and that had a lot of meaning and significance, just being with everybody.
I love something that you've said twice now in different ways, which is that, do we really realize, like, if we talk about Mindleaps kids, but really probably it applies in every case, like, these kids are experts on their own lives.
Yeah.
They are experts at something that we don't fully understand, or that we want to take the journey to try to understand better. And I wonder if that's also a message for some of us back now in our own country, You're in Philadelphia, I'm in New York, and we have an issue. We have something that we need to change in our communities and in our country and around the world. And there's experts who are here. And it's a matter of opening up our ears, and what you've already said today, and listening, so that we can understand where did it go wrong and what is our role to play now in the Black Lives Matter movement. I've heard you speak really articulately on this issue for years. And I wonder if we can hear kind of some of your reflections that would help all of us kind of tap into these core things that for some reason we still have this obstacle at changing, but we have the capacity and the power and the creativity to solve if we stay motivated and focused.
Yeah, so I will say, so I'm going to respond. I'm also going to tie this a little bit back to one of the experiences that I had in Rwanda. And I think one of the things that I was completely struck by in Rwanda is that there was no talking about the genocide wasn't necessarily shame-filled. And there was an acknowledgement and a pretty frank and open conversations about this is what happened and these are the things that caused it. And I did have an opportunity to go through the Genocide Museum in Kigali and just to kind of see, and I was really struck by the fact that there was this deliberate effort, it appeared to me, that they were really tracing like some of the historical roots in the other countries, including the United States, that whether it was intentional or not, actively contributed to the genocide occurring. Absolutely. And I thought, right, so there wasn't a shying away from history and there was ownership of it. And then there was this idea of like, the only way that we're going to heal and come together and rebuild as a nation is actually to do this together and to have these very open and painful conversations and for ownership to be taken. And I think something that here in the United States, I've been reflecting on this a lot recently, especially in Philadelphia. We unfortunately, our mayor did bring in the National Guard, and I really believe that escalated things for us here in the city. Just to be, I think part of the problem has been, well, I didn't personally have a slave or something like that. And I've heard too many white people make that statement. And that's actually not the point, right? The point is for our country to begin to acknowledge the history of genocide and racism and xenophobia and homophobia and all of the isms that go into this. And say like, but our country was actually founded in many ways on these things. And so instead of pretending that's not the case, let's acknowledge that's what's happening. And let's talk about the policies and societal structures that we have in place which deliberately harm and keep other people down, and the roles and the ways that like maybe we voted for somebody who did that, or maybe we didn't, but like, as a white woman, how have I benefited from these policies and procedures that have been in place regardless of whether or not I voted for them? I have benefited from that, and can I acknowledge that and talk about it and then say, what can I do? And so I'll go on the more extreme side and not just be an ally, but how can I be an accomplice or a co-conspirator in dismantling these systems and structures that are harmful for other people whose life experiences are, right, I'm not an expert on. Right. So I can say all I want. It doesn't matter. Like that's not that I didn't live that experience, and I don't have a right to say what that is for them. But how can I listen? And how can I think right. Yeah. I think the act of listening and the act of engaging in these conversations and then looking for creative solutions, that in and of itself is revolution, right? And that's change, and that's a way to dismantle.
Yeah, Rory Zachary was with us last week, who was speaking about how if we want systems to change, right, every individual, just as you're saying, like, people can say they were affected, they were guilty, they weren't guilty, but it doesn't matter, right? The systems don't change unless everybody changes the system. And how lucky are we that we have Rwanda as an example to learn from? Yeah. Right? If Rwanda was able to do this, and like for most of us in our lifetime, like what are those lessons? I mean, we are so lucky that we can copy something that works. And I think you're right. I think it comes down to each individual getting to the point where they're saying, I'm adding my voice to the movement and I'm going to figure out what that is, and acknowledging that we might not be experts, we might not know, but the point of it is that we will figure it out and we will stay committed. And that's the way things have always changed in every country. Right? I mean, Rwanda's had a consistent commitment to this for 26 years. And it's showing incredible benefits. I mean, there's just no excuse for our country not to be able to do the same thing.
Yeah, I happen to agree. And right. And so again, I think but I also think it comes with humility, right?
Yeah.
And so if we can be humble and say, we don't know all the answers. And you know what? I don't have a solution for this. Or you know what? I don't know what to say to that. And I think if we can tap into those parts of our humility, and then to say, let's look and see what are other lessons we can learn from elsewhere, I think that then again begins to move the conversation and the needle forward. But we have to approach it with humility.
Yeah, everything you say, Janelle, just again like triggers so many memories of times I've seen you so effectively help us understand things that are not easy to understand, or help us lay out a path to achieve that collective understanding. And I know another thing that has been so fascinating for me over these last few months that we've had the chance to interact on different things is that I see you very strong and competent and clear during this COVID crisis. And you've advised me directly when I've come to you with cases where like, I don't understand these emotions that are being expressed by other people. Can you guide me? And I wonder, either speaking from your own experience, how you have been able to stay so clear-headed during COVID, or other thoughts you could share with us in general about how we can also pull that healing into our lives and our organizations and our communities.
Yeah, no, that's not a loaded question at all.
How often do I get to talk to a PhD now? Come on.
No. Yeah, so I think it's a couple of things. I think for me, I do talk about this quite a bit. I have a lot of good friends who say to me, Janelle, don't forget to be human, right? And so I think it's that humanity of saying, sometimes I'm really tired. Sometimes I feel really overwhelmed by it. Sometimes I'm just going to eat a bunch of crap and not worry about it. And then there are times it's like, I need to move and I need to be in communication with other people. And so I think it's a lot of this has been for me, and as well, like as a music therapist, I've had the opportunity to share my skills with other people, with other people groups actually internationally during this time. And that's also been very helpful, because as I'm reminding other people about self-care and how to be gentle with themselves right now, I'm thinking about that for myself too. I'm being like, I can't forget about this. So I think the number one thing is to have a lot of grace and to be gentle with yourself. And so that idea of like checking in and saying, how am I feeling today? Why am I feeling like this? Is there something that I need to do for myself? Is it, I know it depends on if you're alone or together, but, do you have to give yourself a hug, or some type of touch? I've done a lot of coloring and making music. And so because creativity is how I express myself, like that's what I've done. I've actually joined quite a bit, as much as I can, the dancing classes that you and Bashir offer. Yes, exactly. And so it's for me tapping back into my own creativity in a way that has meaning for me, and using it in that respect. And then, again, trying to make contacts and connections with friends and family, even if it has to be, remotely via video or Zoom or something like that. The gentleness is the number one. Be gentle with yourself. It's
so interesting to me. I've had the chance to speak with so many dancers on Moments of Mindleaps, and our non-dancer is the one that says we need to be graceful and gentle with ourselves. I love it, Janelle.
Yeah.
I think there's still a dancer inside that we haven't fully explored yet.
Fully found, yes. It's coming.
We have just a couple minutes left with you. Janelle, one of the questions that I get, and I always wonder why people ask me, because they really should be asking you. There's a lot of young people who cross Mindleaps' path and they say, we've really accomplished a lot with understanding how to quantify creative changes.
and how do you marry a career where you're passionate about the arts with a passion about science and measurement? And I'm
Mm-hmm.
not the one who figured that out for Mindleaps. And I always wish these people could be asking you that question, because I feel like you would be the right person to provide some thoughts for them.
Yeah, I think, so I think two things. Um, moving towards measuring the arts is always a difficult conversation, right? Because we we want to not impact or move the arts into like these hard sciences. And so again, I think it's rather than approaching it as being these two very separate things that can't ever find common ground, but rather saying, how can we bring these two areas together? And of course, I'm always going to lean on the side of, well, we might have these measurements, but are they really appropriate? Are they really going to tell us the information that we need to know, right? So it's always the question I'm asking. But I think it's not being afraid to figure out how to bring what might appear in the front as two diametrically opposed things, but bringing them together and saying, what can we learn from these two areas and how can we merge them? And in the creative arts therapies, and community arts, there is arts-based research. So there are other ways and of being able to look at art and creativity as data. And I think that's such an important tool, and understanding that often gets lost in the arts world. And so if you're listening, please look up ABR, look up art-based inquiry. There's so much good information out there. There's a lot of really fascinating researchers. Autoethnography is something that I love. So it's, and I look at it from the arts perspective, but how can I tell my story through the arts as a way, and that actually serves as the data. And so I think it's not being afraid of measuring something or having a standard, but always being conscious of how do you take these measurements and this data and use it in a way that's going to serve the community and the organization. So, yeah.
And it ties again to what you said from the very beginning today, which is, humanity is creative. So if we can start to shift that mindset, that can be probably a healthy thing for all of us, especially as we weave through this new world. Thank you for, I know these publications and these resources that you're suggesting. This video will be on Instagram for us on Mindleaps and on your page. So we'll make sure to add all the links so people can go back and find those good resources.
Okay, great. I'll send some resources to you to add. Yes.
That's the wonderful thing about having a friend who's a PhD.
We're nerdy and we love it.
Janelle, I knew this would be one of the hardest interviews I've done, because I just like to talk to you for hours and hours and hours, and then then I would not be doing my job. So unfortunately, I have to say goodbye to you with a huge thank you. For every time we speak, I learn so much, and I start to think differently, and I'm just so grateful for that. And I'm glad that today more of the Mindleaps family could experience what I've had the chance to experience with you. A huge thank you to Dr. Janelle Junkin, who is both a creative, an artist, and a scientist. And as she says, these all are actually the same thing. Thank you so much, Janelle, for spending time with us on Moments with Mindleaps.
Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
Next week, we're joined by Anna Dufont, who's a young dancer who has had a large career already with Mindleaps and spent time in our Guinea program. So we travel back to West Africa next week, and we'll pull these lessons that Dr. Junkin has taught us this week with us. Thank you so much, Janelle.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks, everybody. Okay. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Thank you.